I never thought a quiet Thursday evening could feel this electric. The sky outside was bruised purple, and the soft hum of the streetlights seeped through the half-open window, painting the living room in gold and shadow. I was leaning against the doorway, holding a mug of coffee I hadn't touched in 10 minutes, because every second I spent watching her felt like standing at the edge of something I didn't know I was allowed to fall into. She was sitting cross-legged on the couch, a book splayed open on her lap, but I could tell she wasn't really reading. Her hair caught the dying light just right, streaks of silver threading through chestnut, and for a moment I almost forgot how young I was, how different our worlds had been supposed to remain. "Call me anything, but not Mom," she said suddenly, laughing softly, that warm, melodic sound that made my chest tighten. I wasn't sure if she noticed the way I looked at her, or if she even cared, but I felt my throat dry up anyway. There was something in that laugh, an invitation, a boundary, and a tease all at once. I shuffled my feet, awkwardly, trying to look casual. "Anything, huh?" I said, though my voice betrayed me, wavering just enough to let her hear the undercurrent I couldn't contain. She glanced at me, one brow raised, lips twitching. "Anything," she repeated, softer this time, leaning back slightly, as if daring me to take it further. Her eyes lingered on mine, and I could feel the weight of unspoken questions pressing between us. It was stupid, I knew. This shouldn't be happening. She was older, experienced, someone people respected. And yet, right there in that quiet living room, it didn't feel like wrong, it felt like recognition. Like I had been waiting for her laugh, for that subtle shift of her gaze, for the small brush of her hand against the page as she turned it. I set the mug down, not trusting myself to hold it steady. "You make it sound dangerous," I said, letting the word hang. She smiled then, a flicker of mischief passing over her features. "Maybe that's the point," she said, and the air between us tightened, charged. I could feel my own pulse in my ears, could feel the slow burn in my chest that came when someone sees you in a way nobody else does. She wasn't looking at me like I was a kid, or like I was invisible. She was looking at me like maybe she was curious, too. I wanted to ask her what she meant, but the words caught in my throat. Instead, I stepped closer, just a little, careful not to break some invisible rule I wasn't even sure existed. Her eyes followed, and I could swear there was a flicker there, something vulnerable hiding beneath the confidence, something that whispered maybe this wasn't entirely forbidden. The room fell quiet then, except for the soft scratch of her turning the page and the distant hum of the street. Every second stretched, electric and uncertain. And then, just as I thought I might finally say something, the sound of the doorbell cut through the room like a sudden crack of lightning. We froze. Her eyes met mine, wide and unguarded, and in that instant, the moment, our moment, was broken. Or maybe it was just beginning. I didn't know who it was. I didn't know what would happen next. But I knew one thing: nothing in my life, nothing before that doorbell, had ever made me feel this alive. The doorbell lingered in my ears long after the knock faded. She hadn't moved to answer it yet, and I could feel the sharp awareness between us, a quiet pull I couldn't name. I glanced at her again, noticing the subtle slump in her shoulders, the faint crease between her brows, as if the interruption had startled her in more ways than one. "You live around here long?" I asked, trying to sound casual, even though my pulse was doing its own thing. She shook her head slowly, tucking a stray hair behind her ear. "Not really," she said. "Came here, after a divorce. Thought I'd start fresh. I didn't expect this neighborhood." She gestured vaguely toward the quiet street. Her voice carried a faint weight, the kind that makes you feel there's a story you're not allowed to fully touch. I swallowed. "Divorce must have been rough." She shrugged, eyes drifting to the window. "It was. At some point you stop blaming the other person and start wondering if you failed yourself instead." There was a vulnerability there, almost hidden behind her calm tone, but I felt it. I could see it. That tiny crack made her human, more than anyone else I'd ever known. I wanted to say something that would erase the distance, but all I could manage was, "I get that." And I did in my own way. I wasn't coming from the same place of history, but I knew what it was like to feel trapped in your own mistakes, to think maybe everyone else had a life mapped out, and you were just late to the party. She looked at me then, really looked, and I could see the hesitation in her eyes. Maybe she was measuring the risk. Maybe she knew I was younger, knew the neighborhood whispered about who I was, whose son I was, and what that made me to her. The age gap alone could be a scandal, and the fact that I was her friend's stepchild, a detail I tried not to think about, made every glance, every lingered second, feel like standing on the edge of a cliff. I shouldn't be. She started, and then stopped, letting the words hang between us like fragile glass. I stepped closer again, not touching her yet, but close enough to notice the faint scent of jasmine in her hair, the way her hand hovered over the armrest, trembling slightly. Shouldn't be what? I asked softly, though I knew. Her lips parted, then pressed together. She gave a faint, almost imperceptible smile, and it sent a jolt through me. Nothing. It's complicated. I nodded. Complicated's okay, I said, surprising myself with how natural it sounded. I like complicated. For a moment, the room held its breath with us. Then, without meaning to, our hands brushed. Just a fingertip, nothing more, but it lingered. She didn't pull away. I didn't. The air between us hummed, fragile, charged. A shared memory, or maybe just a shared heartbeat, tied us together for that second, making everything else fade, the age, the history, the risk. And I knew that whatever this was, it wasn't going to stay simple. I wasn't ready for the knock at the door. She froze the instant it came, a rigid line stiffening her shoulders. I could see her pulse at her temple. That's probably the neighbor, she muttered, though her voice was too low, too tight. I wanted to warn her, to say don't answer, but I stayed silent, holding my ground, feeling the quiet electricity between us thicken. Her hand brushed against mine as she moved toward the door, long enough to send a spark crawling down my arm. She hesitated, just for a heartbeat, and I thought I might lose it, the part of me that knew boundaries. The door opened, and a man's laugh spilled in, warm and oblivious. Hey! I thought I'd drop off the package. I stepped back, giving her space, but every step felt heavy. She smiled at him, polite but distracted, and I realized then how much I wanted to disappear into her. The stranger's voice faded against the roar of my own heartbeat. Once the door closed, she let out a breath she didn't know she'd been holding. I stayed where I was, watching. You shouldn't have stayed, she whispered, almost accusing me, but her eyes betrayed something else. Something dangerous. Why? Because it's wrong? I said, stepping closer, even though a rational part of my brain screamed that it was. She didn't answer immediately, just looked at me. Her fingers fiddled with the edge of the book on the coffee table, twisting and untwisting it like she was measuring her control. I shouldn't feel this way, she admitted finally, voice barely above the hum of the street outside. I felt my chest tighten. Feel what? The pull, She stopped, pressed her lips together, and looked away. Her eyes glimmered, caught in the dim lamplight, and I saw all the things she wouldn't say. All the guilt, the restraint, the longing she tried to hide. I wanted to reach for her, wanted to close the distance between us, but something in me hesitated. A knock on the window startled us both. We turned. It was my roommate, a flashlight in hand, probably checking on why the living room light was still on. We froze. Her hand brushed against mine again, this time longer, deliberate, and I felt the magnetic tug, the unspoken promise hanging there. Either of us spoke. Words would ruin it. Words always ruined it. Then, almost involuntarily, I leaned a fraction closer. She leaned the same fraction toward me. Our faces were close enough for me to see the tiny flecks of gold in her eyes. I could feel her breath. She could feel mine. And then she pulled back. Just slightly, just enough to remind me that everything we wanted was dangerous. I felt it too, the tension coiling tight in my chest, a mix of desire and fear that made it impossible to think straight. I wanted to ask her if she regretted it, wanted to ask if I should leave. But the way she looked at me, soft, hesitant, and desperate, kept me rooted in place. Whatever this was, it was building, and neither of us could stop it. Outside, the wind rattled the windows, and I knew, deep down, that the next touch, the next word, might change everything. I shouldn't have gone over. I knew that the second I walked up her driveway, my hands shaking and my thoughts spinning faster than I could control. But something pulled me in, that quiet gravity that had been building since the first day I noticed her smile, her laugh, the way she moved like she was too aware of the world but still let me in. She opened the door before I could knock, and the sight of her in that soft sweater, hair loose and slightly mussed, made my stomach twist. She was beautiful. Dangerous. Everything I shouldn't want. "You shouldn't be here," she said, her voice calm but there was a tremor underneath. I saw it in her fingers, clenching the doorframe. "I couldn't not come," I said, my voice rougher than I intended. She stepped aside, letting me in, and the apartment smelled faintly of vanilla and old books. Safe, warm, but lined with a tension I could feel crawling up my spine. We didn't talk at first. We moved around each other, circling like cautious predators, aware of the risk in every glance, every shift of weight. And then, without warning, she laughed, a short, almost bitter laugh, and the sound broke something in me. "You're reckless," she said, shaking her head. "Do you have any idea what you're doing to me?" "I don't care," I blurted, and immediately wished I had. But the words were out, and the confession tasted dangerous on my tongue. Her eyes widened, and for a moment I thought I'd crossed a line I couldn't come back from. I can't do this," she whispered, stepping back. "You're too young, too close to everything I should be keeping away from." Her gaze dropped, and I could see the shame, the restraint, the longing, all tangled together in a way that made my chest ache. "I don't care about any of that," I said again, stepping closer despite the protest in her posture. I want you. All of you. Even if it's wrong. Even if it ruins everything." Her hands went to her face, brushing a stray hair behind her ear, but her fingers lingered, trembling slightly. "You don't understand," she said softly. "I've made mistakes. I can't let—" The words caught, and she trailed off, leaving me in that suspended moment, hanging between something impossible and inevitable. I wanted to kiss her then, right there, to erase the careful wall she was trying to maintain, to prove that desire could survive logic. And maybe she wanted it too. I saw the way her breath caught, the way her lips parted, the subtle quiver in her chin. But before anything could happen, her phone buzzed sharply on the counter, cutting through the tension like a knife. She glanced at it, and I caught the briefest shadow cross her face. Something urgent. Something real. Something outside our fragile bubble of risk and desire. I didn't move, but I could feel it, the pull, the ache, the impossible question hovering between us. Do we dare? And then she looked at me, eyes wide, almost pleading, and whispered, "I need to see this." I nodded, heart pounding, because I knew nothing would ever be the same after this moment. I thought I had a handle on it. I thought the tension between us, dangerous and fragile, was ours alone to navigate. I was wrong. It started with a text, her name lighting up my phone in bold letters, and my heart skipping before I even read it. "He's coming over. Be careful." The sender wasn't her. My stomach dropped. I didn't recognize the number at first, then I remembered, my roommate, the one who had been suspicious of my late-night wanderings, my half-truths, my unexplained absences. And now, he'd seen something, maybe more than he should have. I rushed over, heart hammering, rehearsing explanations that would make sense without spilling everything I didn't want anyone to know. She opened the door before I could knock, eyes wide, lips pressed into a tight line. "They know," she said quietly, stepping aside. Her hand brushed mine, almost unconsciously, and I felt a jolt. "Or at least, someone knows something." "I don't," she broke off, shaking her head. I didn't know what to say. We weren't supposed to have a witness, not yet. Not ever. Inside, the apartment felt smaller, charged. Every shadow seemed to watch us. Every creak of the floorboards was amplified. I could see the conflict in her, the desire, the fear, the anger at the situation we didn't control. "I don't want anyone to ruin this," she whispered, voice tight. I don't want them to think it's easy for me to, I get it," I said, stepping closer. "I don't care what anyone thinks. I just want this. You." Her lips twitched, half smile, half grimace. She leaned back, shaking her head. "It's not that simple. You don't get it. I can't just ignore it. I have a life, responsibilities." I reached out, brushing a stray hair from her face. She didn't flinch. "I don't care about your life," I said. "I care about this. About us. Right now." Her eyes glimmered with something I hadn't seen before, fear, maybe, but also a spark I couldn't resist. "And if it ends badly?" she asked softly, the vulnerability cracking through her usual control. I swallowed. "Then we deal with it," I said, though the truth was, I hadn't thought past this second. And then the knock came. Not soft this time. Hard, insistent. My heart leapt. She froze, fingers tightening around the edge of the table. I could see her calculating, weighing risk, weighing desire. "I can't," she whispered, stepping toward me, pressing just slightly into my chest. "But I." The door rattled again. Whoever it was didn't care about hesitation. And in that suspended moment, with our breaths mingling, her hand brushing mine, I realized something. This, the danger, the risk, the thrill, was exactly what made it impossible to walk away. And yet, the uncertainty clawed at my chest. Every beat screamed, one wrong move, one discovery, and it could all end before it even really began. The apartment was quiet, but the silence felt heavier than anything I'd known. She sat on the edge of the couch, fingers laced together, jaw tight, and I could see the tension radiating off her like heat. I didn't know if I should speak or just let the moment stretch, knowing that saying the wrong thing could shatter it entirely. "I can't hide it anymore," she said finally, voice trembling, low and raw. "I've been trying, but—" She trailed off, swallowing hard. I saw the struggle in her eyes, the desire to step back, the fear of crossing lines, the pull she couldn't deny. "I don't care about the lines," I said quietly, taking a careful step closer. "I care about this. About us. Right now. Before it disappears." Her lips parted, and for a second, I thought she'd lean in, let the unspoken truth between us bloom. But she didn't. Instead, she shook her head slowly. "It's not that simple. She broke off, biting her lip, and I realized she was fighting herself as much as me. I reached for her hand, letting mine brush against hers. Her skin was warm, soft, alive. She didn't pull away. Instead, she let me hold it, fingers curling instinctively around mine. That small contact said more than words ever could: recognition, permission, fear, longing, all tangled in one fragile gesture. "I can't promise the world," she whispered. "I can't promise it won't be messy. But She hesitated, searching my eyes as if looking for approval, for courage. "I want this. I want you. Even if it's wrong." I felt my chest tighten. Every rational thought screamed that this was reckless, impossible, and dangerous. But the pull, the gravity of her words, of her gaze, was stronger than logic. "Then let's be reckless," I said, voice low. "Let's not wait for the world to tell us no." She laughed softly, a sound that was more relief than amusement, and finally, she leaned in just a fraction, close enough for me to feel the warmth of her breath. I could smell the faint vanilla and jasmine in her hair, see the soft gold flecks in her eyes, and in that moment, everything, age, risk, fear, fell away. And then the moment stretched too thin, the world pressing back. The phone buzzed again, a reminder that nothing outside this room would ever stop existing. Her eyes flicked to it, hesitant, conflicted, and I realized we were still suspended on the edge, daring each other to fall. I brushed a strand of hair from her face and held her gaze. Whatever happens, I whispered, we figure it out together. Even if it's messy. She nodded, lips barely brushing mine, and I could feel the tension crack, fragile and alive. We weren't safe, we weren't perfect, but for the first time, we were exactly where we needed to be. And as the doorbell rang again, insistent, urgent, unrelenting, I realized the outside world wasn't done testing us. But we didn't move. We didn't look away. In that heartbeat, that tiny breath between everything and nothing, we had chosen each other. The apartment was quiet again, but this time the silence wasn't heavy, it was full of the space we'd finally claimed together. Her hand rested lightly against mine on the couch, fingers intertwined, and I could feel the steady warmth, the pulse of something fragile but real. We didn't speak immediately. Words weren't necessary. The tension that had carried us through weeks of stolen glances, half-finished sentences, and almost confessions had softened into something steady, tentative, and ours. I traced the lines of her hand with my thumb, memorizing the small, human details I had been desperate to notice from the very beginning. I'm still terrified, she admitted softly, leaning her head against my shoulder. Of everything. The judgment. The mistakes. She broke off, sighing, letting the weight of unspoken fears hang between us. I know, I said, voice low. I'm scared too. But being scared doesn't make this any less real. And I don't want to go back. Her laughter was quiet, a shaky, beautiful thing. You really have no idea what you're getting into. Maybe not, I said, shrugging, though I didn't feel it. But I know I want to try. With you. That's enough for me. She shifted slightly, letting her fingers tighten around mine. Enough, she repeated, as if testing the word. I can work with that. Messy as it might be. We talked after that softly, slowly, sharing pieces of our past that hadn't had room before, the regrets, the mistakes, the moments we'd missed others or ourselves. Every word, every laugh, every pause made the connection feel more tangible, more human. There was no perfection, no clean lines. Just two people, fully flawed, fully present, willing to let the other in. At some point, we drifted into silence again, watching the streetlights flicker and the world outside continue in its unknowing rhythm. I realized then that risk wasn't just about age, or judgment, or timing. Risk was letting yourself feel something dangerous and wonderful and choosing it anyway. And we had chosen. She shifted closer, laying her head on my shoulder, and I felt her breath even out, the tension of weeks dissolving. For the first time, it wasn't about what ifs, or should I, or can't do. It was about now. This. Us. The doorbell rang again, soft, familiar, but this time it barely registered. We didn't move. We didn't care. Whatever the world wanted to throw at us, we had each other. I squeezed her hand gently, and she smiled, just a little, a flicker of mischief and relief. Call me anything, she murmured, echoing that first laugh that had started it all. Just not Mom. I smiled back, heart light, chest tight in the best way possible. Anything, I whispered. And for the first time, the future felt uncertain but alive, messy, thrilling, and ours to navigate. Did you enjoy the story? What kind of stories would you like to hear next?